Hey guys, it's Kay from KS Anonymous, and I am back today with another episode of r/Entitled People. New employee steals food from disabled girl. We have a female client at our day center who, unlike the other members, gets her breakfast prepared for her at the center as well as her packed lunch. She always has supplies such as tortillas, eggs, cheese, and meat sitting in the bottom drawer of the fridge to be used daily for her breakfast. The provider who works with her that day will cook up a breakfast burrito for her, and all of the materials are clearly labeled in thick black Sharpie with her name. Since different supplies empty at different rates and it's difficult to constantly keep inventory of everything that needs to be replaced, the supervisor will often purchase supplies to replenish the ones that have emptied the morning of and bill the client's mother for them later using receipts. The supervisor also keeps certain things in the office stocked for general use, such as coffee, creamer, and condiments. We had recently hired a new employee to the center who was experienced and worked really well with this particular female client. Typically, the supervisor will schedule members in a way where they have a variety of staff members working with them so they don't get too stuck on one particular person and refuse to work with anyone else. After a while, the new employee started asking to work with this female client fairly consistently, and my supervisor had no problem allowing her to do so, since they seemed to get along so well and the new employee didn't work every day. After several months, there was suddenly an increase in how often the supervisor had to go replenish items from this client's stock, and she found it odd that said client was suddenly going through the same amount of food at a much faster pace than before. All of the staff claimed they had seen her eating the same food portions every day for breakfast. Providers started keeping an eye out to see where the food was mysteriously disappearing to. After some investigation, it was discovered that the new employee had been making her own meals from the food provided for this client. Her excuse? She had two. One, she said she didn't have a lot of money and couldn't afford to pay for her own lunch every day. Two, she said that since the supervisor was paying for the food, then it was fine for her to take it. She argued that since the client's mom wasn't directly paying for the food, it didn't belong to her client, but rather to the center instead, and staff should be allowed to eat it for that reason. She got a write-up and a swift reprimand from the manager, and so far as we know, she hasn't been stealing the food that belongs to the clients anymore. However, we do have another part-time employee who brings in freezer lunches every now and then and keeps them in the staff freezer to eat for the days she'll be at the center. It has happened numerous times that these frozen lunches disappear and the part-time employee ends up going hungry because that's all they prepared to eat that day and they can't afford to get anything else. I've spoken to the troublesome employee since the earlier debacle, and she's still under the belief that other people owe her food just because she can't afford to pay for it herself. I constantly see her trying to mooch off of other staff and even several disabled members who are more cognitive but still lack the wherewithal to say no to her when she asks for part of their lunch. I can't help but think she's the one stealing the frozen lunches from our coworker. I don't understand why this person would remotely think that it was okay to eat someone else's food in the first place, let alone a disabled individual's food who has their food prepared for them, so obviously they can't really... There's not a likelihood that they're going to speak up. That is like a classic bullying type of move. I don't think this person really needs to be there. I get that right now it's just eating food they're not supposed to, but some people will learn that they have a certain amount of power and begin to abuse that in other ways, and I just think that's a huge red flag and this person probably needs to go soon. When a Karen runs a charity. I literally have no idea where to post this, so if someone knows of a better Reddit, please point me in that direction. A few years ago, I had picked up a job with a charity that supplies clothes to the homeless and runs a thrift store. At the time, I was unemployed and willing to give it a try. I enjoy thrift stores, and this one seemed to be a good cause. Unfortunately, it was ran by a total Karen. Now, Karen was quite smart and knew how to put on a good public face. It's how she managed to have a good standing with our community. But when you're actually working with her, she was an absolute nightmare. Now for a bit of background about me. I have ADHD. Because I've experienced discrimination for it before while growing up, I've taken great lengths to disguise it as best as I can. I never tell anyone that I have it, and I do whatever I can to keep people from finding out. The goal is to pass as neurotypical, so I'm really careful. This is really important for later. I worked at the charity as office staff, with my big focus being in programming and graphic design. Aside from Karen, I worked with an older woman who I'm calling Linda, and a recent high school grad, Amy. Linda was also a Karen in her own right, and basically Karen's right-hand woman. Linda has no problems throwing someone under the bus if it meant she could improve her standing with Karen. The time I was there, this was what happened. Karen was a vegetarian and a health food enthusiast and liked forcing it onto other people. One time, she went through the staff room fridge and threw out bits and pieces of everyone's lunch that didn't fit her view of what was healthy or vegetarian. For me, she threw out my entire lunch and just left me with the spoon I packed in. She left that spoon out on the staff room table, which was never actually cleaned, which is not a good thing at all because we had an uncontrolled mouse problem. Like there were no traps set out at all. She just let them roam. As far as lunch was concerned, I ended up going to a 7-Eleven up the ways to eat. After that, if I ended up bringing a lunch, I hid it in the freezer, which she never checked. Linda is as dumb as a stump when it came to computers. She was the sort who fell for scams and malware all the time, which meant that all the company laptops were infested with malware and viruses. It took me forever to fix them, and I didn't share one of those laptops with her. Thankfully, she never asked. As a precaution, I had a flash drive with portable software on it, think portableapps.com, and kept almost everything on it. I left some files for show on the company laptop just to demonstrate that it was being used. Karen wanted to buy some extra software for the computers and gave me the funds to buy it. Unfortunately, the receipt for this ended up in my personal non-company email, so I forwarded her the receipt to her email. For Karen, that wasn't enough and wanted access to my personal email. I told her I wasn't comfortable and she was about to push for it until she got distracted by one of the thrift store floor staff needing her help. Karen forgot about the email thing entirely. Whenever we got cash donations, Karen spent it on herself instead of helping the homeless, including buying 2 new big screen TVs and claiming they were for the charity. She took them home afterwards. Also, our better, higher quality donations for the thrift store never made it out to the thrift store floor or into the hands of the homeless. Karen took that all for herself and handed out the good stuff to her friends. This is all pretty much run-of-the-mill for Karen so far. There's more, but this gives just a general sense of the sort of person Karen is. But this is mild in comparison to her stance on neuroatypical people. Her treatment of anyone she perceived as neuroatypical was shocking. One time we had someone come in for a job interview. The interviewee was telling Karen about how she's heard of the charity from her friends and how it seemed like an amazing place to work. Ha! Karen asked who recommended the charity to her as a place to work, and the interviewee said she didn't remember offhand which friend it was. Karen was all really nice to her face, but as soon as the interviewee left the building, Karen turned around to all of us in the office and gleefully told us that she was never going to hire the interviewee because she thought she had a brain injury. Her reason for thinking that the interviewee had a brain injury? It was because the interviewee couldn't remember which friend told her about the charity. That was Karen's logic, and I was freaking appalled. I couldn't believe it. She was that brazen to announce this to the office like it was no big deal. This was really early on in my time there. I was still a new employee when I heard that, and I remember feeling absolute disgust for Karen. But Karen got even worse with poor Amy. Amy was a friendly person who enjoyed a conversation on downtimes. She was also a good employee and a hard worker. Unfortunately, she ended up in Karen's crosshairs. When Amy was out of the office and it was just Linda and I there, Karen would announce that she thought that Amy suffered from depression. WTF? It was close to Christmas, and Karen had rummaged through the donations to grab a book on managing mental illness through vegan eating to give to Amy as a Christmas present. She went through the book, highlighted the part on foods that would help manage depression, thinking that this was a great idea worth sharing with the office. Amy was the absolute last person I'd say was depressed, but come the day before Christmas break, Karen gave Amy the book and made absolutely sure to tell her about highlighted bits. Amy looked confused as heck, but if there was anything I could give her credit for was that she was polite about the whole thing. After Christmas, Karen went to talk to Linda, asking her for everything she knew about Amy. They went to Karen's office, so I have no idea what was actually said, but I suspect it wasn't nice things about Amy. It wasn't very long when Amy came back from her break that Karen popped out of her office and told Amy that it was her last day. I don't remember everything that was said, but I do remember she was being fired right in front of us. Amy was clearly upset and left the office not long after that exchange. But I think the worst thing that was said was when Amy was out of earshot. Karen, in her usual bravado, announced to the office that she thought Amy had autism, and by firing her, this will teach her a lesson. At this point, I was getting scared of being found out. Soon enough, the writing was on the wall for me. Karen would start taking away projects from me until I had nearly nothing to do all day. At lunches, I'd head out of the building saying I was heading out to grab a pizza. In reality, I was having some major anxiety attacks and needed to hide from everyone. But I knew I was next, and honestly, I knew this wasn't healthy for me. So I decided I wouldn't give Karen the satisfaction of firing me. So I lied and told her I had a job elsewhere as the reason I was leaving. I made sure there was enough people in the room to hear it so she couldn't quite make up some story about me. But this being Karen, she probably did. But at least someone would see her for the arse that she is. But yeah, this was literally the first job I ever actually quit. So apparently Karen's into discrimination and illegal activity, stealing, all the sorts of things that one should not do. And I do not like this Karen. She's more than just like a rude, entitled person, but like super messed up and not okay. Like you don't... None of that is okay. What the heck? I'm glad that you got out of there. That is not an okay situation to be in. Karen rips my mask off because it's displeasing her. First time post here, so give me a break. Also, I hereby give permission for this to be read on YouTube. Also, TLDR at the bottom. The cast, me, the bird, Kay, well, Karen, entitled piece of trash that thinks it's a good idea to rip the mask off an immune-compromised person during a pandemic. NE, nice store employee, and beer is, you know, the thing. This happened while I was doing my shopping for needed supplies, just at the start of the big bad beer outbreak. I had my medical required mask, mind you. I have had to wear this long before the outbreak when I went outside, so I don't pay attention to people staring much anymore when I hear that dreaded sound of a Karen asking for my attention. Excuse me, young lady. I'm in my early 30s, but I often get mistaken for a teenager. Excuse me? Yes, can I help you? She glares at me hard. You should not be at the store if you are ill. You are risking other people's lives. Where are your parents, young lady? Side note, I'm a very shy person with anxiety and PTSD, so this lady was starting to hit all my triggers. I'm not sick. Then you don't need this mask. She freaking reached for my mask and rips it off my face, throwing it on the floor. I'm standing there in shock because 1, who the heck does that? 2, sudden moves toward me, bigger trigger, so I was in a panic attack central, and one of the things that happen when I panic is that I freeze. I need that for medical reasons. I started picking it up and putting it back on in a panic. Karen tries to stop me when an employee who had been watching until this point speaks. I didn't know this till later. What is going on here? Oh, an employee. Thank God. This child is sick. Kick her out now so she doesn't get the rest of us sick. I tried to say something, but by this time I'm in full panic mode, and Karen being Karen cut me off. Don't try to lie, child. You're clearly sick if you're willing to pick that mask up off the dirty floor. Actually, madam, she, pointing to me, has a health issue that requires her to wear that mask. She shops here quite often, so if anyone is going to get kicked out, it's going to be you. Please leave this woman alone and be about your shopping in peace. Also, OP, give me your list. I'll gather what you need. Wait for me at customer service. You look like you're having a panic attack. Okay, I did hand my list and beat feet to customer service. Don't really know what happened to Karen after that, but I did get a bit of discount on my shopping, so yay. TLDR, Karen was offended that I have to wear a mask, so she ripped it off my face. I don't understand what people don't get about like the whole personal space, and everyone being so surprised that immune compromised individuals exist is kind of disheartening as well. Anyway, that is going to wrap it up for today's video. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and drop a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Really quickly, I'd like to thank my patrons. Up on the screen, you should see my face palmers and my crazy case. Thank you all so much for supporting me in that way. If you're interested in becoming a patron, checking out the original post from today's video, or contacting me via email for possible inclusion in a future video, all of that information is in the description box, so be sure to check it out. And I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye!